Welcome back to Johnny Reads. So today I'm going to do something that I've actually never done before on the channel, at least I don't think. I'm just going to recap my reading from the previous month, which of course was obviously October, that just ended with, now being the calendar flipping right over into November of this year. And so, very quick recap, just if you don't know, which you probably don't. My goal is to read 50 books a year. I've never done it before. This year I'm getting really close. And at the beginning of October, I needed to read 8 books each month. So October, November, and December to get my goal. So obviously that puts me at 26 going into the month. So let's see if I was able to do that, to stay on pace, or my pace that I've created for myself for the end of the year, or if I'm falling a little bit short. And so the first book that I read at the beginning of October was The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. And I do want to mention that this is one of the best books that I've ever read in my life. And this is, having read a few hundred at this point now, it was so good. And the reason I really enjoyed it, I think, and why it really kind of struck me was because it's such an Hispanic book. And you don't really get that too often. It was just such a good book. Like, I cannot talk about it much. I cannot talk about it in any way without saying how excellent this was. I actually told my mom about it, and she doesn't really read like that. I rated it 5 stars, and it's one of the best books that I've ever read. It's when I was looking back, and it's really hard to think about books that I've read years ago to now. But I came to the conclusion this would be number 6 on that list. Next up is Trinkets by Kirsten Smith. And I picked this book up, as you can see on the cover if you took a look, that it is a series on Netflix. And that was the reason that I picked it up, because I found the Netflix series last year when it first came out. And they just released season 2 recently. I really enjoyed the series. It's kind of one of those surprising ones where you stumble upon it and you're like, man, I really like this. And I read the book. Didn't really like it that much. I rated it 2 stars on Goodreads. It left a lot that you would be longing for at the end, and it's written in a really weird fashion. I just didn't take with me. And next up is the third book of the month was Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I've already done a video about this. I'll put a link right there to it, and I rated it 3 stars on Goodreads. That's all. Next up is A Long Way Gone by Ishmael Bey. Once again, another book that I've already done a video on. I rated that one 3 stars as well, and I will put that link there as well if you want to take a look. Next up was The First Rule by Robert Crace. Now, Robert Crace is one of my favorite authors. I have almost all of the books that he's ever written, which is probably he's probably pushing about 30, 35, and I'm in like the mid-20s. And that was one of the most recent, at least for me, Elvis Cole and Joe Pike novel, and Joe Pike is actually the main protagonist in that one, which doesn't happen too often in the series that he's been writing for, since the 90s at this point. Really enjoyed it. I rated that one 4 stars. Next up was The Fall by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. Now, if you are not a fan of The Strain that came out on Netflix a few years ago for 5 seasons, and anything about vampires, like, where have you been? The series was so good, and it was brutal, and it was just like, it was kind of disgusting when you look at it, like definitely like a horror series, obviously, with vampires freaking taking over New York, but I really enjoyed it. And the series, it's a trilogy, so that was the second one in the trilogy. The books they've both been pretty good. I had the third one. Hopefully I can find it in my neighborhood, half price at some point, and then I'll finish up that trilogy. Next up is The Room of White Fire by T. Jefferson Parker, another of my all-time favorite authors. Him, I don't have every book that he's written, but once again, really close. And that one is actually the first in his new Roland Ford PI series. He was getting back to the reason that I came to love him in terms of the writing and the story. But that was the first in the series. I rated that one 3 stars as well. And I think I missed on The Fall. I rated it 4 stars on Goodreads. The final book that I read in October, and I actually just finished this one only a couple days ago. It is Flash Boys by Michael Lewis. Michael Lewis, if you're unfamiliar, he writes only nonfiction, first off. He also famously wrote Moneyball, which I think just about everybody has seen at this point. That's an all-time great sports movie, first off, but it might be the best baseball book that anybody's ever written about anything related to baseball. And so when I bought this, the reason was because with Michael Lewis, he's such a good writer, and like after reading Moneyball, I knew that I had to read more of his work at some point. But this was my second time reading one of his books, and Flash Boys, I can't get into that too much because honestly, it's really like, I would say complex in terms of the subject matter. It's about high frequency trading on Wall Street and in the stock market. But it is so good. Like, it's kind of funny that I bookended the month with 5-star read Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde and 5-star read Flash Boys by Michael Lewis. Like, that does not happen. And anybody who knows me, and I know that you probably don't follow me on Goodreads, but I'm really stingy in my ratings. So when I have 2 5-star reads in the span of a month, that's pretty insane. Like, that just shows how good they really were. And so if you're kind of counting along at home, that was 8 for the month. And I'm going to be completely honest, when I finished Flash Boys, I finished it late on the 29th into the 30th, so it was just after midnight. So I had roughly 2 days in the rest of the month to see about getting one more to get to 9 to even get ahead of schedule. I wasn't able to do it, and I'm going to be honest with you, because the book that I picked up to read next, I just was not feeling it at all, and I only read like 15 pages, and I was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to read this one. So I'm on schedule though. I have November 8 books that I need to read, I have December 8 books that I need to read, and I have a whole lot more waiting for me to be read after that. So technically I'm on schedule, and I'm really, really close to getting my goal. So I'm currently now, as of making the video, I have read 34 books out of the goal of 50. Now, just as an FYI, that's already my second best year ever. My best is 44, but that was all the way back in 2012. So there's been a lot of down years in the span of that time. But that's all I have for you today. Just a really quick video about what I was reading this past month, and then I'll probably do it again in November. At the end of November, I'll probably do it again at the very beginning of the year, going into January as well, to see if I was able to get to my goal. But that's all I have. What's your goal for the year? How are you doing? And if you tell me that you've already hit your goal, well, I don't like you. But I will see you next time.